Hello and welcome. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Ishan. Today, we focus on the call of the Prime Minister to widen the tax base. On Thursday, Prime Minister Modi asked taxman to double the taxpayer base for income tax to 10 crore and build a bridge of trust with the people so that tax collection targets could be achieved without coercion. In the first such instance of a Prime Minister addressing top tax administrators directly, the Prime Minister identified 5 pillars: revenue, accountability, probity, information and digitization, called it RAPID. And that, he said, would improve efficiency of the tax administration. Now, in a country which has a population of over 100 crore, the total number of taxpayers is just 3.5 crores. Coupled with statistics such as the black money economy constituting 75% of GDP, widening the tax base is imperative as well as a very difficult task to accomplish. So how can it be done and what are the challenges and their solutions? I'll be talking about all this and more with TK Arun, Editor Opinion at the Economic Times, Dhirendra Kumar, Head of Value Research, Sanjay Kumar, Senior Advisor Deloitte, and Professor Pinaki Chakraborty from the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. Professor Chakraborty, I'll start with you just to outline the target that has been set and the fact that in our system it's really skewed in terms of the total population and the tax base. So it's an imperative for the government to focus on, and it's a good initiative that the Prime Minister himself is asking the taxman, for the first time a Prime Minister has done that, to really take a serious look at this problem.
Certainly, it is important and very significant. But if we look at the history of India's tax reforms since 1991, I think a lot of positive things have happened. And I think the reform that Prime Minister is talking about has to be seen in that context. When in 1991 we started our reform, our income tax rate was prohibitively high. And that rate has been brought down to 30%, which is one of the lowest in the world now. And our tax mobilization also has gone up, tax base has increased. Whether it is adequate or not, everybody would say, of course it is not adequate. We need to expand it further. Now, this expansion of base has 2 aspects. One is base expands for some reason automatically. So if your economy is growing, so people have more income, they pay more taxes. When the economy is in downturn, your tax mobilization comes down, your base goes down. Now, what Prime Minister is talking about here is, I think there are 2 parts to it. One is that Prime Minister is trying to say that you increase the number of taxpayers. And I believe he is talking about both direct and indirect taxes, not only the direct taxes, right, because indirect tax also pays something like 50% of your total revenue. So when Prime Minister is talking about both the taxes, I think we have to talk about the general approach in taxes that is happening worldwide. Worldwide, what is the trend? The trend is we are talking about we should have a broad base. Broad base means it should be non-distortionary tax. That means you should not, as a government, shouldn't say that I'll tax X, I'll not tax Y.
Right.
So I'll not tax rice, but I would tax potato, for an example. So what I am saying, when we are moving towards a non-distortionary tax regime in the form of GST or lowering of the tax rate, we also need to reduce tax rates. Right. So that is one. Second structural constraint that we face when we say that we have to increase the number of taxpayers, and I think it's a major problem, is the large informal sector in the economy.
Right.
And informality doesn't happen just like that. Informality also happens because of taxation. So it's interlinked. So it's a complex issue, but I think what Prime Minister has said in terms of a target is very significant, because if we are able to increase the number of taxpayers, we actually pay taxes, not just files returns, I think that would have an impact on our tax to GDP ratio, right, which is important, because nobody would disagree that our tax GDP ratio is optimum. I think we have to go a long way, and in that context, it is appropriate.
All right, Sanjay Kumar, but the point being that the 10 crore increase that the Prime Minister is talking about, in terms of the target, it's certainly a big target to achieve. But in terms of how to go about it, or even getting to that number, how long it would take, what is your take on that?
Look, this number that he has mentioned, 10 crores, is just an estimate. Okay. Today, we have actually effective number of taxpayers is about 3.7 crores or so. The tax department adds to that those who have not filed, and that's about 1.2 crores. So effective, so number of taxpayers that we can think of is about 5 crores. So 5 to 10 is almost like doubling the number of taxpayers. Now, obviously, there are large number of people who are not paying taxes or not in the tax net. Now, who are these people? If I can recall, Vijay Kelkar, when he wrote the report some time back, he talked about the missing middle. He talked about the professionals, chartered accountants, lawyers, doctors, architects. These are the kind of people who are not paying taxes. I'll come to the other category later. But he talked about this. Government has brought some, presumptive taxation measures to, bring these sort of people into the tax net. But there is a whole lot of another set of people, which is the retailers. And these are small retailers who are not in the tax net. And for them, there is no presumptive taxation. Now, if you look at what has other countries have done, take for example, Malaysia has a very, very significantly well established and with a lot of interest, a presumptive taxation. Now, if I take a step back and see what happened in India, the actual number of taxpayers jumped significantly from 2.5 crores or 2.6 crores to almost like 3.2 crores at the time when the government of India implemented 1/6 scheme. But this was, discontinued at some point of time, saying that this has not been very effective, etc.,
Right.
etc. And then 1/6 was made to 1/4 and things like that. But thereafter, we haven't had any effective, presumptive taxation regime. So government needs to bring that. And I'm not saying only on the direct taxes side, also on the indirect taxes side, because that will also, because to lure these people, the small retailers in the tier 2 cities, in tier 3 cities, and they are doing significant amount of business. One hope is that with the GST, they may come into the tax net. But what is nobody talking about that by itself, the law cannot bring them. So you need to bring certain schemes or certain measures.
Incentivizing taxation.
Incentivizing and bringing certain measures which can bring them in. So you need to put the schemes in the manner that they can, those people are part of it. So there are a lot of things. So a number of steps have to be taken before something like this can be realized.
So the target can be achieved with a number of steps. But it's also a question of political economy, isn't it, TK Arun? The fact that you were nodding along when he was talking about the traders and the parallel economy, and the fact that even agricultural income in India is not taxed, and there have been calls for taxing that as well. So in terms of biting the bullet on that one, do you think that to achieve this target, the government will be forced to do that as well?
See, agricultural income actually is not exempt from tax. State governments are free to tax agricultural income. It's a different matter that many choose not to. And the largest number of our cultivators are actually very small holders who will not be actually able to pay tax. And plantations do pay tax. So that's not really the issue. The issue is, as you said, in the political economy. We are very proud of a democracy. But our democracy is funded 99% by black money, by money that is evaded tax or avoided tax. And that is how parties want it. If you really want to clean up your tax system, clean up your black money problem, then you need to institute transparent funding of political parties. So as long as this is not done, so long as parties continue to collect money from the proceeds of corruption.
Isn't that tough? Isn't that like surgery on yourself? Do you think political parties will fall in line and do such a thing?
Well, if you want tax compliance, you need to do that. All democracies start off being corrupt. Somewhere down the line, they clean up their act. So India also started off being very honest, then became corrupt. Now it's time we actually cleaned up. So once you do that, once a company or a wealthy individual is not required to generate black money just to pay off politicians, bureaucrats, extortionists and all that, he'll be able to actually be more honest with his compliance. So it's not just a question of lowering the rate of tax to a realistic level, but also creating a situation where you do not actually need to amass a war chest of tax evaded money to pay off the political system.
Yeah.
That is very important. The second thing is, the Kelkar committee suggested creating a tax information network where people file 1/6, all kind of details from which people will collect data. Now actually we have in the era of big data. If you use big data, you don't capture data just from tax authorities or people who are designated to file information with the government on information returns. You take Facebook, some guy is standing there with a new Audi. Has he paid tax? What is the income tax he has actually shown? The government should be able to collect data using the vast amount of data that is generated on social media,
Okay.
on various other sources, and analyze people. If somebody is, posting on Facebook a picture he has taken at Disneyland, I was there just before the shooting in Orlando, then, okay, you, very good. But did you pay tax on the kind of income you required to actually make this travel to Orlando?
All right. So data collection.
Data collection, I'm glad that the Prime Minister included as part of his 6 things. If you use that intelligently, you can widen your tax base. But first, you must create a political system that is transparently funded.
All right, I want to focus a little bit upon the parallel economy, and I want to get Dhirendra Kumar in on that as well, because that is where a large part of the problem is, that from the smallest to the biggest, the fact that cash is a more preferred transaction than rather transparent transactions is a problem, and that comes with also a mindset that tax avoidance is almost looked upon as not a bad thing over here.
Yeah, that's the fundamental problem. Every tax evaded and saved, evaded is the money that you have for consumption, and it is considered to be smart. But there are very straightforward way that I think we have made very rapid strides. If you look at the tax information network that we have, if you look at the kind of interlinkages, all the value-added taxation framework that we have built over the last 10-15 years, GST is going to be a big leap on that front, because today if you actually avail a service, you pay the service tax, you leave a trail, and we have a very massive information network which is able to track down individual taxpayers, their consumption pattern, and it is all resident in the government's machinery. You look at the KYC being implemented on all the investments being made. So I think it's now we have all the resources going up from 5 crore to 10 crore, that broad basing your taxpayer base is not a very significant thing. Just by bringing in some sanity, some clear framework in terms of how to approach them, how to bring people in fold. There are 3 things which can be, 3 things which is a serious impediment. One is that there are some people who will be wanting to pay tax, but they are generally scared of being maltreated if they get into the fold. So they want to avoid it altogether. So that is a really the low-hanging fruit which the government can target. That apart, there are people who are completely out of the framework, and GST is going to be a very huge leap on that front. The middle thing is that the people who don't want to, and they have kept themselves away from the framework, taxation framework, I think people need, the government need to really get after them. And as the Prime Minister said, that you need to really this is one department, this is one machinery of the government where which is very different from other places where corruption prevails. There is a clear payoff when you in other wings. Here most people will not be willing. So one is a cultural shift. A moderation of tax rate will help greatly, or at least on that front, and a reassurance of not being badly treated over time could be another. So carrot and stick will work here.
All right.
And
quoting the Prime Minister, in fact, over
Dhirendra,
the point taken.
That we have been able to build, going from 5 crore to 10 crore, is very significant.
All right, but Sanjay Kumar, taking from what you were also saying earlier and what Dhirendra has been alluding to, that the tax regime has to be non-adversarial. It has to be more incentivized, as you were pointing out. But there are also leaders such as Subramaniam Swamy of the BJP who's come out today and said that if he comes in, he would abolish all taxes, income tax as well. So is that an approach? Is that a feasible approach? Or incentivizing it? How does one incentivize taxation?
I mean, I can put a counter question. Which country has done that? There's no country in the world which has removed the taxes. Okay, let me quote that OECD countries collect only about 2% of the corporate tax, but they do have corporate tax, even if 2%. A large number, 98% is collected as the personal income tax. So no country, apart from the oil producing countries, they don't have, but of late they also started having that. So if the government have to be run, they need resources. Okay, I can give you another one, that Russia brought this flat tax rate of 20% or so. And over a period of time, they brought so many of those, so flat tax became a scheduler tax. So the point that is there, that there will be aspirations, the government has to run the state, there are requirement of so the coffers have to be filled in.
Right.
Where do you get this money from? But I also want to add to what TK and as well as Dhirendra was talking about. On the, how do you capture this? And TK talked about the Facebook, etc., etc. One thing which is very, very important, and which is where many of the modern or advanced tax administrations have moved on, is the one government approach on the data. We have so far had two data systems, one run by the CBEC, one run by the CBDT. And those data don't talk to each other. Unless you start the data to talk to each other, you cannot, I have been a tax administrator in my previous job, and I can tell you that the first point of tax evasion is not direct taxes.
Okay.
It is indirect taxes. So you need to tackle that, and you have to tackle that in a comprehensive manner, and the data has to be one. Now that GST is coming in, it's a good time for the government to bring that kind of system, which the GST database, because we are creating one big database, and the direct taxes database, they start merging and talking to each other so that we have a comprehensive database and nobody, the target candidate does not get out of the
All right, so data management, more efficient data management is of course a point that I think all would agree as far as filing taxes and managing taxes is concerned. But Professor Chakraborty, as far as the income tax department itself and the various facets that go into it and the people that staff it, I was reading somewhere that almost half of the department has vacancies and have not been filled. So in terms of structural problems, in terms of just manpower to administer tax reforms at such a scale as we're talking about, do we have that in place?
See, I think we really, when we are talking about overall mobilization of taxes, I think we cannot we cannot talk on silos about income tax or indirect taxes. I think generally our it is generally said that in developing countries tax administration is tax policy, because our tax administration itself is complex and has many infirmities and weaknesses. So I would definitely say that there are more people needed, and I think that if you see newspaper reports, government have been appointing more officers, both in the indirect taxes and direct taxes. But the point here is, I think we are to, as Sanjay has said, I think we need to integrate data and information system together. And I think when Prime Minister talks about the issue of compliance without harassment, if I put it that way, in that framework, I think when there will be a compliance without harassment, I think it's not that we are more dishonest than the rest of the world. I think it happens when I know that I am being monitored. Now, when I am given a signal that I am not monitored, I will evade a tax. That's a normal human tendency. Now, that is where the information system plays a crucial role. If I know that I am monitored, without harassment, I'll go and pay the taxes. That's the way. And it has been discussed in literature. An anecdote I want to give. Someone said, if the tax administration sends a birthday greeting card, the tax compliance goes up. People know that your address, and they also know that when you were born. So he has all the information, the tax official has all the information. I think that's the way, that's the modern way of dealing with tax system and the taxpayers. I think that is what is most important, rather than giving targets and asking the officers, this is your area, collect this much of taxes. I think we have to move away from that system to a modern system of tax administration. And the last point on this issue of overall cost of collection issue that we are talking about, I think our cost of collection as a developing country is not that high.
Yeah, that was quite surprising. That is what
that is quite
IRS officials point out.
I would definitely not say that we have been wasting a lot of money in collecting tax and collecting too little. And if you look at the overall tax mobilization in our country, I think with all infirmities, if we look at all the countries in the world, the tax to GDP ratio is around 10% of
Right.
GDP. India collects around 16 to 17% of GDP. I'm not saying that's optimal, but that's fairly above the average.
Okay. I also want to understand, because GST has been mentioned in this conversation quite a few times, and even from the government's thinking, according to newspaper reports, it certainly seems that GST is being looked at as the big revolution that would even impact direct tax rates and not other factors as much.
So GST will, as Sanjay pointed out, it creates multiple audit trails, right? If you buy from somebody who has never been paying tax in his life, but you are used to, paying tax, then you will now want a bill because you can claim input tax credit.
Right.
So you'll demand a bill from the guy from who you have purchased your raw material, and he will be forced to generate a bill. He will be forced to pay a bill. Now, as he said correctly, avoidance, evasion starts from not only indirect taxes, from not paying for electricity.
Right.
See, if you pay for electricity and your electricity bill is so much, then it's very difficult to pretend that I don't produce anything, so I don't have to pay any tax, and that I don't have any income. So once you get your political economy on theft of power right, the 30% of the power that is generated in this country is not paid for.
Right.
10-11% can be technical loss. The rest is theft. Roughly 20% of the power that is produced is stolen. And people steal it, not because they can't afford to pay for this. Once you pay for the power, then you are generating an audit trail. I have consumed so much, I have paid so much for electricity, then I must account of what did I do with the electricity. So I must have produced something. If I produce, then I have to pay so much of excise. And if I produce so much of excise, paid so much of excise, I must have so much of income. Then I must pay income tax. Why pay electricity?
Okay.
So unless you bake this patronage of theft that is done by the political class and force people to pay for electricity, so the beginning of your transparency in income generation. Then you bring in GST, which creates multiple audit trails. Your tax base will automatically widen.
Okay.
And you use data smartly. Not only Facebook, but also how much people pay for electricity, how much they spend on travel, various things. You'll be able to actually get a much fuller picture of your actual tax base.
Sanjay, I know you want to comment, but I quickly want to get in Dhirendra also because he's quite a distance away and it's final comments now. So Dhirendra, final comment from you. The bridge of trust is, I think, one of the most important factors, and it requires a complete sort of relooking or rethinking about from the internal administration, the IT administration, to even how the common man thinks about taxes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the roadmap should be very clear. We are we are on the at a point when things are poised for being completely revolutionized. GST is one where the whole value addition change across the economy will get accountability, and it will create a special opportunity that it will get people on board. The other thing is you can evade taxes only on two fronts. One is while you're producing, while you're running a business, or we are the part of economy running on cash transaction. The other is what do you do with that cash? And I think there we have to really move forward. I haven't heard too many things on that front. That what do you do with the cash that you generate over time?
Okay.
You only buy property, and that I think is also a very low-hanging fruit. It is a fairly straightforward thing. Integrating the state registration of assets or land and property and buildings into the fold, because the finance ministers over time have done this. They have brought in the TDS of 2% for transaction over over a certain threshold, but we know that lot of transactions happen which don't go under. So tightening that noose, once we realize that cash has no utility, how much can you consume beyond a point? So I think we have to really think of it in terms of streamlining it and getting focused on something meaningful, high value, high ticket, which drives compliance rather than getting after 5 crore people.
Okay, so big, bold reforms on taxation. Are we looking at that? I mean, is this the first step, the rapid, as the Prime Minister pointed out, Sanjay? Final word to you, 30 seconds.
Let me put it slightly differently. While the reforms on that policy is very good, but what Pinaki said is the tax administration is tax policy. What the government has not thought of is the reforms in the tax administration. And that, unless you change the structure, because at the moment you have too much of emphasis on the auditing and that, the traditional services. Whereas if you see the many other tax administrations, they have created a whole lot of taxpayer service.
Right.
What you are getting at the moment is basically tax information through these newspapers or the websites, etc. There's such and such laws have been changed. But where is the tax service? And I would want to mention just one thing, if I can have
Very
1
quickly,
minute.
I've run out of time.
HMRC, UK's HMRC, they have brought the cooperative compliance. They use the data to bring, analyze the taxpayers' data and then call them and tell them this is what we have found. And the customer relation manager, which is basically an HMRC person, but looks after the interest of the taxpayer and removes the adversarial aspect of that and brings the kind of what they call as the cooperative compliance. And you know that from 5,000 sample taxpayers, they could collect additional £2 billion of taxes. And this is not a small sum.
All right, so just a small change in mindset, I think, could even prove to be one of the biggest steps, and that it would be a huge step, I mean, if that mindset changes. But thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming, and thank you very much, Dhirendra, Kumar, for joining us. On that note, we'll have to wrap it up. We've run out of time, but thanks so much for watching The Big Picture.